folks, just as we promised you last week on the show, we told you we would be out at Texas training camp for the 2013-14 season. Hey, we're here, as you can see from all of the activity going on behind me. So hang in there, folks. It's the Cutt from Texas training camp.
From now on, my team is a legion that can't be stopped. We gon' go for the goal till we reach the top. This is just the first quarter, can't you feel the crowd? It's football time, can't you feel me now? How many times I'ma tell you my team's the best? We gon' win this game, no contest. Yes, football time. Once again, it's on. So everybody out of your seats and start to get wrong. And tell them, we ain't never scared. 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 Let's go. The anticipation, what's about to go down. You can feel the vibration from town to town. 22 players ready for taxing. All the people in the stands are ready for action. It's time to go head to head on the gridiron. Watch out! Cause the turf is flying. It's just the second quarter, 4 seconds to halftime. It's a Hail Mary pass. It's football time. It's football time. Once again, it's on. So everybody out of your seats and start to get wrong. And tell them, we ain't never scared. 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 Let's come into the game. It's high, dirty to dirty. It's going back and forth. It's about to get ugly. Everybody doing the wave to get in for the team. It's the heart of the battle, the American dream. Now it's 20 yards to go. You can feel the tension. Concentrating on the game. No time for slipping. It's prime time. Sunday night. We made the field goal. Everybody get high. It's football time. Once again, it's on. So everybody out of your seats and start to get wrong. And tell them, we ain't never scared. 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 We ain't never scared.
Hello, folks. I'm Craig Shelton from HoustonMediaWatch.com and the Urban Television Network, of course. That's the Cutt. You can get me Sunday nights and Wednesday nights, 6 to 7, on UTN 43.8. I'm standing here with the lady Stephanie Stradling. Hello, Stephanie.
Hi, how are you doing, Craig?
Doing good. And I'm talking to my little sister here, Kim Davis. How are you today,
What's
Kim?
up, Craig? Good.
Doing great. All
Yeah.
right. Look, I felt like it'd be pretty appropriate since these ladies were out here getting their shine on at practice. So I felt like I might as well do one thing right for once in my life and talk to the first ladies in Houston of Texan Talk. Let's get it started with you, Kim. I want to get your general thoughts on what you've been able to see so far in training camp and what you're taking away from it up to this point.
Well, you know, it's early. We're only finishing up, like I've played, but it's the end of the first week. And so the key thing is kind of watching the injuries, who gets hurt. Yeah. Other than identifying players for positions, you want to try to get through camp pretty healthy. And they haven't had a ton of injuries, but they have had a few. The other thing is, I tell you, one person that I saw early that I was impressed with was Case Keenum. Mm-hmm. You know, markedly different from the Case that we've seen previously. And so seeing him kind of come up, he looks a lot more confident. Now, he's not going to challenge Matt Shaw, but it has been nice watching him. And of course, the young rookie Hopkins, seeing him, he's got great hands. He's got a great work ethic. And one of the things that I remember about him at Clemson is that he played with a lot of other weapons. And so he still put up big numbers. So what that says to me is he can come in and be on the other side from an Andre Johnson and know how to still perhaps give the other defenses some things to look at. And I am really curious about what's going to happen on the right side of the line. They seem like it might come together and work. And talking with Dwayne Brown, he said for the offensive line as a whole, that's exciting to them. So those are some of the early things that I've seen in the first week.
I think all three of us could agree in our sleep that the right side of the offensive line, at minimum, is of some concern. It's one thing to have youth, but it's another thing to have youth coming off of an injury. And so some things there to be concerned about, no doubt about it. Stephanie, I'll go to you. Kim talked a little bit about, obviously, you're always concerned with injuries.
Yes.
Kind of update us in that regard and then, do the same thing. Give me your thoughts on what you've taken out of camp to this point.
Well, it's good to remember that this is the last day of camp, or this morning practice is the last morning, and then they have the afternoon practice off. They have tomorrow off. So a lot of players that were maybe questionably, are they going to come back, may come back on Sunday. There's been some talk by Gary Kubiak that Arian Foster might come back. I would expect Whitney Merciless to come back. It'll be interesting to see if Ben Tate's okay. He left today's practice with what Gary Kubiak said was a groin issue. He didn't say if it's serious or not, although he did imply that because today's camp was mostly about young guys, a lot of guys, sat out, the vets, that, if there was going to be any, doubt about it, they were going to pull him out. Alan Bonner kind of pulled up after a difficult catch.
Right in front of us.
Right in front of us.
Yep.
And, Kubiak said that he thought it was a hamstring, although when it happened, basically he landed, he limped around a little bit, and then he pulled his foot back. Sometimes that looks like you have a cramp, but we really won't know more details until Sunday. So Sunday's the time where people should kind of pay attention to what the reports are coming out of camp, because really everything in the NFL is about endurance. It's not like who's playing right now. It's, okay, who can play in December and January, and Texan fans know that better than anyone.
Yeah, and focusing in on some of the young players that have joined this team via the draft this year, and some good news when you start thinking about a guy like Hopkins and you start thinking about Swearinger, but then there's some concern. Trevardo Williams may not be as ready as some would hope that he would be. I still think he's a kid that may be able to contribute on some level. I could actually see him doing what Whitney Merciless did, maybe putting up a few sacks, and maybe people thinking, wow, we got more here than we really do because of the situations he may find himself in. And then there's the guy, Sam Montgomery, who can't get on the practice field. Of course, Brendan Williams is a concern. Stephanie.
Well, I think as it relates to Trevardo Williams, if the Texans need him to have significant snaps, they're in trouble. So, but I think the biggest thing that he can contribute with is special teams. If you looked at the tape from special teams last year, there's plenty of effort, but there wasn't a lot of speed. There's Brian Brayman, who's very fast, and then some guys that are not quite so fast, and some people that were kind of inexperienced at the position. One thing that you can say definitively about Williams is he has some speed. Now, as for the other guys, Gary Kubiak had talked about, everybody's disappointed about it. They'd like to see him on the field. Sam Montgomery's out here. He's off the big boot, but now has kind of an air cast on his ankle. And it's just going to be you can't help that your knee swells up. So, but they are so far behind. It's going to be hard to see them contributing right away. But that's not to say that they can't be contributors. Brandon Brooks last year did not see the field. They had high expectations. Here's this big-bodied guy, but he was too big. But by the time that they got to the end of the season, they had a need for him. They started working him into the lineup, and now, from day one, he was a starter at guard. So that may be the role that, if those players have something special to show, these coaches are going to be able to find it. Right. Wade Phillips puts people in good situations, and this offensive line coach is probably among the best at finding lower round picks and developing them into something if they're able to do it. But for the offensive line, being able to stay on the field is a skill.
Right.
And to be fair, Brendan Williams had that issue coming out of college. If he didn't, he probably would have been drafted higher.
Yep, no doubt about that. As you can see behind us, and I'm sure you can probably hear, we've got fan day out here, the Texans, many of the Texans went over and signed autographs for the fans. I saw Ed Reed along the sideline over here, accommodating some folks. I saw J.J. Watt hold court over here on the sideline with the media and some of the folks that brought out kids and relatives. Then he goes over and holds court again. So with the other fans, J.J. Watt is really, really good about that. Let's talk a little bit with you, Kim, about some of the folks last year, and I'll say guys, not just last year's guys with the sophomore year, but you look at a guy like a Shiloh Kale who's in his third year now. How are things gonna work for these guys moving into this season? What can we expect, and who you kind of have your eyes on as far as continuing that maturation process and being able to really contribute in a more solid direction this year? Let's start it with Keyshawn Martin.
That's a good question. I think he was on his way, and I'd really be curious to see how he progresses. And I think this is a really important camp for him, especially with him bringing in a Hopkins to see what he can do and how he can find his play. So I'm watching him a lot. A guy I continue to like. I mean, we saw him make a huge jump last year, and so he's not that young anymore as Kareem Jackson.
Oh, yeah,
his confidence from last year is carried over, and he's an entirely different player than he was 2 seasons ago, even a season and a half ago. And then this guy's not young, but he's coming off a big injury, and that's Cushing. And when you talk about having something like an Achilles, and how do you approach that and not be tentative? And he's come in and he looks confident. He says he's not favoring anything. He's excited to be out because, Kubiak, I know, is kind of saying, hey, let's ease him into it. He wants to go, and you need, that they miss that force in the middle on their defense. So how he comes back from that injury when they play will be, I think, really important as well. I mean, he knows the game, but coming from an injury like that, you can be fantastic or it could take a minute. So those are some of the guys that I kind of am really looking at.
And good comments there. I agree with a lot of that. A guy who's getting a lot of run right now, who takes snaps, is a guy by the name of Case Keenum. Yeah. I'm of the belief that no matter what Case Keenum does, and maybe John McClain, my stepdaddy, has gotten into me a little bit, but I'm kind of following his take on this. I'm in full agreement with him. I almost don't think it matters how well Case plays. Mm-hmm. I just don't know that Gary Kubiak would actually make that move on the depth chart and
make him number 2.
Make Case Keenum the number 2 guy on this roster. Stephanie, are you in agreement or disagree? You can never read Stephanie's face. She's got that lawyer thing working, poker face. Even a smile might not mean what you think. What do you think about that?
Okay, I think that my point of view on Case Keenum is maybe a little less bullish than some. I will tell you that Gary Kubiak very much likes Case Keenum. Mm-hmm. He is probably as high on Case Keenum as anyone is. Mm-hmm. But the difficult thing about covering him is if he succeeded in Houston, Texas, that would be a tremendous story. I mean, everybody's rooting for that. So when you have that natural inclination to root for something, you have to guard against, am I seeing things that are not there? And ultimately, the biggest thing when you're looking at rosters is not just, okay, is this guy better than this guy, or what skills is this? Like, how does that work with the roster? Case Keenum still has practice squad eligibility. Right. There's some people who believe, oh, well, if you put him on the practice squad, somebody would take him. But, it's really hard to take a quarterback off the practice squad at his height, and also he hasn't been through your camp. And are you going to use a roster spot on Case Keenum? So it's almost like the best of both worlds. He knows the offense. Mm-hmm. They can stash him on the practice squad. People aren't likely to take him. You still have TJ Yates. If push came to shove and somebody took him off the practice squad, you'd probably be able to get Stephen McGee back if the worst case scenarios were happening with Matt Schaub. I think the good news, however that plays out, because, injuries can change a lot of things. All it takes is stepping a little bit wrong, and then we're having a different discussion. I think the best thing for Texan fans to remember as it relates to the quarterback position is all 3 quarterbacks look so much better this camp than they did last camp. Obviously, Case Keenum was learning the playbook, and he looks like a whole different player from last year. TJ Yates, he's looking like a different player, but a lot of it's going to have to be played out in the preseason games because both TJ and Case didn't have the greatest preseason. Keenum didn't really have that many snaps, but part of that is, are either one of them going to look like Sage Rosenfels did when he did preseason?
Which Sage? Sage Copter?
No. The preseason favorite, Sage Rosenfels, who just came in. In fact, the year that he got cut from the Vikings, he had the highest quarterback rating in the preseason, still got cut.
Why are you retaining that stat? Why do you know that?
I wish.
Stephanie, why do you know that stat?
I wish that the spots in my brain that know that sort of thing could be used instead to cure cancer. But
Do you have my running back stats from Pershing Middle School? I won't date myself with a year, by the way.
If you gave them to me, I would probably not forget them, and that's a little disturbing.
Folks, just as we promised you last week on the show, we told you we would be out at Texas training camp for the 2013-14 season. Hey, we're here, as you can see from all of the activity going on behind me. So hang in there, folks. It's the Cutt from Texas training camp.